As a wilderness guide, I learned the terrifying rules to survive the haunted forest. I never should have opened that door. The chill that ran down my spine, like ice creeping in, warned me. But curiosity, that treacherous beast, pushed me forward. It was supposed to be just another evening at camp. The smell of burning wood mixed with the crisp air, a scent of comfort. I had my coffee steaming, the sun sinking low, painting the sky with blood-red hues. But then, a whisper cut through the evening calm, slithering under my skin. "Do you hear that?" I asked my companions, who sat around the campfire with hardened eyes. They glanced up, faces pale, shadows stretching in the flickering light. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. I recognized fear mingling with the smoke. Shadows danced among the trees, no longer playful but sinister. Each crack of a twig echoed like thunder. I could feel something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. The forest had a heartbeat, and it was not friendly. A shadow darted between the trunks, quick as a thought. We weren't alone. A cold breeze swept through, pulling at my clothes, chilling my core. Goosebumps rose on my arms. I struggled to breathe, a lump forming in my throat. "Just the wind," I murmured, but even I didn't believe my own words. The flickering flames cast eerie shapes on the trees. They twisted and turned, like fingers reaching out. I couldn't shake the sensation that something was watching us, waiting. The whispers transformed into a chorus, a cacophony of mournful wails. My heart pounded, a drum echoing in the silence of gathering darkness. Then came the strange noises: snapping branches, rustling leaves. I shot up, scanning the tree line. It was as if the forest itself was alive, determined to keep its secrets hidden. A distant scream broke the stillness, piercing and raw. It sent jolts of fear racing through me. My eyes darted around, desperate to grasp what lurked in the shadows. I had been warned of the haunted trails, the creatures that roamed when the sun set. But I hadn't believed. Not until now. The air grew thick, suffocating. I reached for my flashlight, its beam flickering like a heartbeat. I stepped closer to the edge of the trees, the boundary between light and darkness fading. Suddenly, I spotted a figure, barely visible, just past the veil of shadows. It stood still, watching. A scream caught in my throat as I felt the cold grip of terror seize my body. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, without warning, a door slammed somewhere deep in the forest, echoing through the trees. I ran, heart racing, but the figure lingered in my mind, a haunting question swirling in the air around me. What was it? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The forest loomed behind me, a living tapestry of dread woven into the very fabric of night. My companions huddled close to the fire, their faces etched with anxiety, eyes wide with terror. No one spoke. Words felt heavy, forbidden, as though even the sound of our voices could draw the darkness in. I kneeled at the edge of the flickering flame, trying to keep the warmth close, but every crackle sounded like a death knell in the oppressive silence. "That we need to leave," I murmured, though a deep, primal instinct clawed at my gut, warning me that the forest would not simply let us go. But where would we flee to? The path back to safety seemed swallowed by shadows, an unfathomable abyss. The whispers intensified, spiraling into a screech of anguish, memory-laden cries that tore at the strands of my sanity. What had we awakened? The lone figure I had seen before came rushing back into my mind, a frail silhouette, yet filled with an unsettling energy that dulled my senses. I dared a glance back toward the black expanse of trees, heart pounding like a war drum. And then I felt it, a shiver, not from the cold, but from a presence brushing against my mind, a whisper that skirted the edges of my consciousness. "Help us," it murmured, or perhaps it was just the wind. It was too chaotic to discern. My blood ran cold. I clutched my flashlight tighter, its beam still wavering, casting grotesque shadows that danced in paroxysms of despair. It flickered, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the same figure again, closer this time. Its head hung low, hair obscuring its face, but the outline was unmistakable. I staggered back. "Did you see that?" I gasped, turning to my friends, but they were too lost in their own terror to respond. The forest was closing in, breathing heavily around us, a deep rhythm that shook the ground beneath our feet. Before I could gather my bearings, the fire blazed up, flickering violently. I caught sight of Movementa blur darting between us and the forest, a ghastly shape slinking close, its frame shifting, mutating, stealing into the shadows. "We can't stay here," I shouted, but the words crushed under the weight of panic. "We were trapped, a prey hunted by the unseen. Where do we go?" One of them whimpered, panic-fractured eyes searching for an escape. I scanned the tree line, apprehension swelling within as the whispers transformed into a swirling storm, a morose chant that emanated from the depths of the woods. It urged for compassion, for understanding, even as it gnawed at my sanity. Suddenly, the earth trembled with a rumble so deep it reverberated in my bones. A guttural laughter echoed, despairing yet mocking, relentless in its terror. This was no ordinary haunt, it was something else, something ancient and bitter. I felt it clawing at the edges of my sanity, inviting me to cross into its depths just to know the truth. Then, dominating the cacophony, a scream split through the air, harrowing and close. It rippled across the camp, turning our blood to ice. It was a voice laden with terror and pain, begging for release, a voice I almost recognized. I looked into my companions' eyes and saw their fear mirrored back, but something darker flickered in their depths, something that suggested they were contemplating surrendering to the forest's pull. The chanting grew louder still, weaving into a hypnotic rhythm that tugged at my heart. With dread seeping into my soul, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Panic struck again. I turned my flashlight toward the forest, squinting against the eerie glow, and there it was, a procession of shadowy figures emerging, unknowable forms stitched together by anguish, drifting toward our camp. That I flung myself back, shouting, "Run!" But questions tethered me. Was I the hunted or the hunter? Just as I steeled myself to flee, I felt a tug on my sleeve. One of my companions, wide-eyed and trembling, grasping at the fabric that separated us from that ghastly front. The ground snapped and creaked like a ship at sea, its power pulling at hesitant hearts. I began to drag him away, but the unrelenting pull of the forest enveloped us, a familiar warmth from his grip draining the hope from my veins. "Stay with me." "We can't," but my voice crumbled into the night as the figures began to call my name, echoing my own doubts. They stepped closer. 1, 2, 3. They whispered in tandem, "Join us." But then, through the swarm of shadows, a familiar figure emerged, my own reflection twisted beneath the moonlight, glistening with an essence not my own. It grinned mockingly, its mouth stretching wider than should be possible, filled with a feast of teeth, each one an echo of lost souls. And as all reason slipped away in a torrent of panic, the forest heaved a sigh, like a great beast awakening, and the screaming began anew. I felt the grip on my sleeve slacken, and fear surged through me as I turned back to my companion. His eyes were glossed over with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Was it terror, or had he abandoned his will to the forest? I fumbled to maintain our connection, pulling him toward the firelight, but he stood rooted in place, his attention drawn toward the ghostly figures that now encircled our camp like a veil of malice. "Don't look at them. Focus on me," I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat, but my voice felt feeble against the chorus of voices that clamored in the depths of my memory. "Join us," they continued to hiss, coaxing him further into a trance. That a second heartbeat echoed in the air, louder than mine, as if the forest itself had a pulse, a dark heart thumping beneath the soil, urging us to listen, to succumb. Shadows writhed against the trees, stretching and crawling like living ink under the dim moonlight. My flashlight flickered once more, leaving us in a brief, disorienting darkness. When the beam stabilized, I faced the fire again and gasped. The flames had twisted, forming the shape of a gaping maw, the hungry visage of terror ready to consume us all. Each flicker cast grotesque shapes onto my friends' faces, contorting their features into masks of horror, not merely reflections of fear but echoes of something far more sinister. "Your time is near," a voice whispered, wet with a slithering intent, as the silhouettes moved closer, encroaching on the tenuous barrier of flames. Through the crackling bonfire, I glimpsed their faces' warped expressions, twisted in agony but somehow familiar, as if molded from fragments of my past. They beckoned, their arms elongated and flexible, fingers curling around the air like vines yearning for a home. My heart raced as I stumbled back, finally acknowledging the truth I had refused to consider. They were not merely spirits, they were connected to me, each one a past trauma, a lost memory that had come alive. "Please," I pleaded, approaching my friend again, but he remained a mere shadow of himself, eyes glassy, fixated on their mad dance. The air thickened, electric, and I remembered stories I had once dismissed as drunken ramblings around campfires, the souls of the forest entrapping the unwary, feeding off their deepest fears, forging them into agony-laden figures to torment others. "Help us," a woman's voice called, smooth and seductive, emerging from the throng. Her features were blurred, shifting subtly, yet her sorrow was palpable. My instincts screamed at me to sprint, to tear away from the supernatural embrace, but hope flickered like the weakest candle, suggesting she too might yearn for salvation. "Stay away!" I yelled, but she stepped forward, emanating a wave of despair that splashed over me. "You can save us!" Suddenly, a great moan reverberated throughout the encroaching dark, a sorrowful lament that swallowed my thoughts. The forest swayed, the trees groaned as if alive, burrowing roots into our minds, grasping at the memories we still clung to. I could feel the mistakes, losses, the burdens of guilt and regret slowly rising to the surface, flooding my heart with venomous nostalgia. As I fought to keep my focus, the shadows began to swirl, coiling around the fire, extinguishing the light that had held back the night. A moment of profound silence enveloped us, broken only by my rapid breaths and the increasing roar of some unseen thing in the depths of the forest. My friends' whispers stirred uncertain, pleading with one another, their forms merging with the shadows, faces blurring into a disorienting mosaic of grief. "They will claim us," one murmured. "It's too late," another added, and I fought the urge to scream. Then I saw a figure, the twisted version of myself reaching into the shadows, an enticing promise enveloped in darkness. "You belong among us," it hissed. "You cannot escape your past." In that moment, panic transformed into a searing clarity. I churned with emotion, knowing that I couldn't let my companion slip away. I lunged toward him, yanking him from his stupor just as the forest began to thrash violently, as if enraged at our defiance. Together, we fell back against the weight of the impending night, grappling to break free from their grasp, but the ground quaked beneath us. The shadows screamed, losing form as they merged into a ghastly whirlpool, their presence amplifying into something palpably monstrous. But then I noticed something much more chilling at the edge of my peripheral vision, a hand breaking through, grasping toward my friend from behind, whose eyes were now filled with not just despair but a wild invitation. "Don't resist," he pleaded against the cacophony, "they can give us timeless peace." And just like that, I stood alone before an uncertain future, the forest rippling at my feet, ready to claim what was left behind. As the figures began to chant my name once more, their voices rising in a crescendo that resonated through my very bones, I was forced to make a choice: a leap into the abyss or a desperate fight for what little hope remained. But as I made my decision, the earth opened up beneath us, and a single chilling thought pierced my mind like ice: even if I survived, what remnants of myself would be left behind? The instant the ground gave way, everything around me shattered into chaos. The forest, in its twisted malevolence, erupted into a cacophony of howls and cries, sounding less like lamentation and more like a sinister symphony celebrating our inevitable demise. I barely had time to grasp the remains of reality before I was plunged into a dark pit, an unyielding void that swallowed light and reason whole. Tumbling down, I felt my body collide with something solid but yielding, like fleshy earth, a grotesque amalgamation of dirt and rotting flesh. I gasped in horror, instinctively pushing off, clawing my way up. The stench was overwhelming, a miasma of decay entwined with desperation, filling my lungs with each frantic breath. Above me, The last glimpse of firelight flickered and vanished, leaving me enveloped in a suffocating darkness as cries from my companion echoed eerily above. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath me, twisting and writhing like a living entity eager to consume. I felt hands clasping at my ankles, grasping fingers clawing and pulling me into the ground, the manifestations of those who had succumbed before me, desperate to add my soul to their wretched collection. I fought against the pull, frantically reaching for a fragment of solid earth, but the darkness whispered promises of release. Sweet chaos crawling beneath my skin, join us, they all beckoned, an insidious murmur coiling through the blackness. The familiarity of their voices slithered into my consciousness, the memories of loss, betrayal, abandoned dreams surfacing as spectral fingers brushed against my skin, igniting long-buried suffering and torment. No. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the void. I had to push it away, push them away. I summoned every ounce of resolve and thrust my hands forward, searching for any trace of light, something to anchor me before the abyss claimed me entirely. And then I felt a softness against my fingertips. I grabbed it hard, pulling, clawing, surging upward as if trying to breach the surface of a dark ocean. The grasping hands lingered at my ankles, their coldness seeping into my very being, but as I pulled, I refused to surrender. I would fight, even if it meant unleashing the nightmares of my own making. With a final desperate lunge, I broke free from the depths. Light shattered the shadowy veil in an explosive rush, spilling over my vision and imbuing my senses with renewed fire. I found myself sprawled on the forest floor, gasping, aching, every muscle in revolt as I struggled to regain my bearings. Somewhere above me, the forest was moving, trees bowing, branches twisting like grotesque fingers trapped in a frenetic dance. Shadows jostled against one another, settling once more into those fractured faces, warped yet achingly familiar. Despair knitted their features into a perpetual mask. "Help us!" they cried, their voices harmonizing into a dissonant lullaby that clawed at the remnants of my sanity, a harrowing reminder of their past, each face a fragment of my life lost to time, each cry a reminder of every time I had ignored their pain. But even as I grappled with the horror surrounding me, my eyes fixed on something more insidious lingering in the distancia, a circular glow emanating from deeper within the forest, pulsating in vibrant hues that starkly contrasted against the blackened silhouettes. It beckoned me forth, an ethereal sanctuary hidden among the chaos, and I knew not whether it held salvation or further damnation. "Follow the light," my friend's voice whispered, as he materialized at the edge of my vision, bathed in the glow. His eyes shone with an unsettling clarity, an invitation tinged with madness. "It will all be over soon." His face transformed then, seamlessly melting into a nightmarish visage of those who had once roamed the earth, twisted yet inviting. "You can be free." The shadows churned at my back, their whispers growing louder, a chaotic river of voices urging me to succumb to an insatiable darkness. I could feel them pulling me toward that glowing light, towards the escape that they promised. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a trap. I hesitated, caught between the memories that ratified the darkness and the promise of something otherworldly calling to me. As I turned toward the glowing pulse, I glimpsed something moving within it, something alive and hungry, and just as that realization struck, the earth beneath crumbled once more, fissures opening up like roaring jaws in the earth, revealing scorched remnants and the souls of the damned reaching out, dragging me back into their tormented embrace. "Don't go toward the light," I heard a voice say, a deep malevolent rumble hidden among the whispering shadows and the cries of the lost. "It's a deception." But before I could process the warning, the light flared brighter, bathing everything in an unholy radiance, and a chilling thought gripped me. What if stepping into the light was indeed my only escape from the haunting shadows that now converged upon me, ready to drag me into the spiral of despair? As that glow enveloped me, every fiber of my being screamed for a choice, yet all I could do was stand frozen, torn between worlds, as the shadows whispered of doom and the glowing pulse offered what felt like a twisted salvation. That in that moment of heart-pounding terror, I was left with a harrowing truth: the choice to leap into the light, or surrender forever to the darkness that craved my soul. The light surged like a tidal wave, crashing over me with an overwhelming force that thrummed with an undeniable urgency. I felt myself vibrating, body and soul caught in a cyclone of energy that invited liberation. Driven by instinct and dread, I stepped forward, teetering on the precipice of salvation and despair. the shimmering glow reaching for me with outstretched tendrils. But the shadows stirred restlessly at my back, their whispers fracturing my resolve, pulling my thoughts apart like tissue paper in a storm. Join us, they hissed again, and I trembled, the familiar agony of loss rekindled in my heart, their voices chillingly intimate, remnants of love turned to ash and screams. I turned away from my memories, refusing to let them drag me back into the dark depths, but the pulsing glow seemed to resonate with my longing for peace, for an end to the torment. A flicker at the edge of the illuminated path caught my eye. Within the radiance, I glimpsed shadows of people, flickering like candle flames struggling against the wind. Their faces seemed familiar yet grotesque, as though they were playing at humanity, their expressions shifting in a way that twisted my very understanding of reality. I gasped, recognizing one among them, a woman with hollow eyes and skin stretched taut across a skeletal frame. "Help me!" she wailed, her voice layered with my own past regrets, a concurrency of memories and realities colliding in a catastrophic rush. "Get out while you can." With every scream, I felt the weight of my indecision crushing me. Would stepping forward exonerate me, or lead me deeper into the despair I had buried for so long? The darkness writhed with ire, the will of the shadows intensifying as if my hesitation was a provocation. "Now," they urged insidiously. "You're just prolonging the inevitable." In that paralyzing moment, I wondered, what horrors awaited me in the light? Would my friend emerge intact, or would he too succumb to its treachery, transforming into a mesmerized shade before me? My heart hammered in tandem with the pulsing light, an echo of dread harmonizing with desperation. The ground convulsed under me, clawing fingers of shadow grasping for purchase, threatening to pull me under once more. I had no time left. Summoning every ounce of strength, I lunged forward, trapped between the frenetic spinning of darkness and the pulsating allure of light. As I crossed the threshold, the world cracked open, a violent eruption of colors burnt through my vision. I screamed, a raw cry of terror and exhilaration as the light consumed me whole. For an instant, I felt weightless, without gravity or fear. Yet, gravity returned with horrifying vengeance. I tumbled into a vortex of voices, the cacophony crashing down around me. I was neither in the light nor in the shadow, but suspended in a liminal space cruelly mocking my existence, a corridor of shifting energies and distorted realities. Faces swam before me, their expressions holding the reflections of past lives, each tangible yet ephemeral like the sound of a fading bell. "Save us," they blurted, stretching out hands that melted into the void, fading as visions burned away from memory. I was caught in a frenzied dance of longing and loss. They reached for me, their faces intertwining in a symphony of despair, a haunted chorus pleading for deliverance, and then, the specters began to merge into something more sinister, a colossal collective shadow rising against the light, forming a grotesque amalgamation of anguished souls now gathered to conjoin their torment. It reared back, pulling the strings of anguish from each lost vessel to form the dark sinews of a towering entity, an abomination stitched together from the pain of 1,000 untold stories. "Join us," it bellowed, a voice laden with sorrow and malice, cascading through the void, echoing in my mind. Panic clawed at me, the awareness crushing my spirit. I was not the bearer of salvation but a mindless part of a larger tragedy. No escape lay in the light, only unending torment. I flailed against the currents of despair, pulsing rhythms of an ancient spell spiraling towards an endless cycle of anguish, my own life newly entwined within their lost tales. Suddenly, a ripple coursed through the mass, and I caught a glimpse of a glimmering artifact, shimmering amidst the chaos, a pendant reminiscent of a compass. It shone with a purifying brilliance, illuminating fragments of faces that seemed to know escape, offering sanctuary amidst the storm. And as I reached for it, it slipped from my grasp and vanished, evaporating into nothingness while the monstrosity roared in rage, shattering the world around me. Before I realized what had happened, I felt the ground beneath me give way once more, a final chasm opening wide, threatening to swallow me and all the phantoms with it. Bowing before the might of the wretched entity formed from fear and regret, that I screamed, a sound lost to the darkness as I plummeted, the whispers rising in a furious crescendo, drowning out my last vestiges of hope. Would I unite with those souls, or would I forge a new path amid the gathering shadows? As I fell, I heard the voice calling to me once more, undeniable and sharp, There's still a way out, but what awaited me in those depths was a terror born of lost time, and all I could manage was one desperate plea to the universe before the darkness engulfed me: not again. In that moment, a sinister realization struck me. Was about to discover how deep the rabbit hole truly went, and who would come for me when I finally landed at the bottom. The sensation of falling ebbed into a jarring halt, and I found myself sprawled on damp earth that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath me. I was no longer suspended in the void, but nestled within a scene cloaked in an oppressive twilight. Sparse beams of moonlight filtered through the tangled branches overhead, illuminating a macabre landscape that defied comprehension. Silhouettes darted behind the trees, porcelain faces stitched with wild anxiety. The trees appeared crooked, their barks mottled and twisted, gnarled limbs groping as if yearning to snatch you away from the light. The air buzzed with an unsettling energy, pregnant with whispers that snaked through the shadows and caressed my skin like cold fingers. From somewhere deep in this horror-laden thicket came the unmistakable sound of discordant laughter, erupting in cackles from the churning blackness. My heart raced with familiar panic. They were here, the shrouded figures from my past, the very shadows I thought had receded into my memories. They glided just out of sight, cloaked in the stench of decay and despair, luring me deeper into the relative safety of the forest. That I forced myself upright, trembling as the realization settled heavily within. Meth pendant had created a rift, transporting me to an older nightmare, where the rules were lost amidst wails and feline grins that lurked at the edges of my sanity. I had traversed a threshold, and now the haunting forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of horrors waiting to awaken at my first misstep. Help me. A child's voice called urgently, incomprehensibly familiar, slicing through the laughter like a blade. I turned swiftly, straining to grasp the source of the plea. The voice resonated with an unsettling innocence that pulled me toward its origin, but a threatening presence curled around my ankles, dragging me down as it whispered words so vile that they scraped against my heart. Run, run, there's danger here, the wind insisted, but it was too late. The trees twisted together, closing in a coiling mass, wrapping tighter around me, their branches weaving a shroud of imminent dread. The laughter evolved, escalating into haunting cries that warped the very fabric of reality. That I pressed forward, drawing on the flicker of resolve barely left in me as I traced the voice's echo. My skin prickled with an awareness that I was not alone. The forest held more than memory, as it held the weight of the forsaken, of the bodies and souls trapped within it. Each footfall stirred the ghosts of the past, urging me to unlock their hidden sorrows. Those unending echoes begged for recognition, for understanding. With each step, the ground shifted beneath me, a breathing entity that seemed both alive and resentful, losing its grasp on sanity. The child's voice re-emerged, frantic and desperate, urging me on, imploring me to unite with those who had once flourished in daylight, those whose laughter now resided within these vengeful trees. Please. They're coming. Fear gripped me as I let my instincts guide me, rushing toward the source. Panting and frantic, I charged through the underbrush, feeling the dark fingers of the forest closing in yet again, racing to escape the grip of shadows. Sudden silence fell as I broke into a small clearing, bathed in a ghostly glow that hovered like static in the air. In the center lay an old wooden chest, ornate and worn, a beacon amid the darkness. The child's voice spoke again, more coherent now, a baritone whisper that wrapped around me like a shroud. Open it. You must. As I reached for the chest, a chill skittered up my spine, aware that whatever lay within could shatter this fragile balance of hope and horror. I hesitated, dread pooling within my gut. The forest seemed to hold its breath, dark figures lurking just beyond the edge of light, their longing palpable, ravenous for the secrets held inside. And then, like the swift stroke of a demonic hand, the ground quaked, the cacophony returning, voices swirling together in a tempest of disarray. Shadows loomed larger, and the laughter rose again, this time more sinister, ripping through the veneer of calm. In that moment, I was struck with the certainty that the forest demanded a payment, and the cost of curiosity would drive me deeper into its clutches. With courage barely gathered, I flung the chest open, awaiting whatever was to come. As its lid creaked alarmingly, a flash of blinding light erupted, filling the glade with a sickening hue that turned even the darkness to stark terror. My breath halted as I stared into the depths. In the chaos of blinding radiance, a blood-curdling scream tore through the air. My name echoed, desperate and wretched, reverberating from every shadow and root, as the laughter transformed into shrieks of agony, and in that instant, I realized that I had awakened something far worse than I could have ever imagined. The blinding light clawed at my vision, spiraling beyond anything I had anticipated. The chest's contents writhed and pulsed, an unholy mix of shadows and memories that seemed to coalesce in the air before me. Faces flickered in the abyss, anguish and betrayal etched in their features. I stumbled back, frantically shielding my eyes from the illumination now spilling across the clearing, mingled with the encroaching darkness that clawed hungrily at the edges. "Help me. It's your fault," screeched a voice that I could never forget. It was my brother's, a lament laced with sorrow that twisted like a blade in my heart. Panic surged through me, the urgency and blame wrapping around my throat as if the very forest was choking me with it. A suffocating weight pressed down, urging me to succumb, to silence the pain. With trembling hands, I clenched the latch of the chest, as though the act alone could contain whatever cursed entity spilled forth. Shadows surged toward me, twisting into a tempest of sorrow, their fingertips brushing against my skin, leaving trails of chill in their wake. Each contact felt like an accusation, a reminder of the bonds severed and the lives lost. The cacophony grew, the laughter transforming into cries that echoed with the desperation of spirits lost between this realm and the next. "You can't leave!" they shrieked, as if the very air around me had grown sentient. The ground shuddered and groaned, as if awakened by their tormented souls. I could see the essence of my childhood woven into the spectral tendrils that danced before me, pale hands reaching for me, yearning to reclaim what was lost. The trees encroached further into the clearing, their jagged branches extending toward me, a malicious embrace threatening to crush the life from my very bones. "Open your eyes, see the truth." The ethereal chorus pleaded, their voices blending together in a discordant melody that dipped like a pendulum, swinging closer to despair with each heartbeat. It was never just a game, we were never safe. I slammed the chest shut, feeling a despairing howl echo beneath me as if sealing the gate to a forbidden realm, my heart pounding in response to their ferocity. But it wasn't over. I could sense the vibration of terror vibrating through the earth, merging with my own escalating dread. There was something ancient and insidious lurking beyond the fragile barrier of the chest, a pulsating darkness that writhed like a serpent, slithering up through the cracks of the forgotten ground. The air around me thickened into a paralyzing fog, images from the past spiraling around me in wild chaos, remnants of laughter turned jarring screams, shadows entwined with the haunting memory of my brother's last desperate call before he faded from existence. "Please, help me!" echoed from the depths of the forest, a child's voice compounded with tangled threads of anguish. It cut through my fear, yet I knew it would lead me further into the abyss. The blind compulsionto saved them, but at what cost? My fingers trembled at my sides as relief entangled with despair, the need to discover the source swelling within me like a rising tide. In a shuddering breath, I stepped away from the chest, feeling the pull of the voices guiding me, wrapping around me like a shroud, urging me down the path where dread insisted I should not tread. "Trust us," the disembodied word squeezed from the air itself. Each step I took felt wretched, resonating with a grotesque familiarity, like walking toward an inevitable demise. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching, parsing my every move, awaiting my next choice like a predator enacting its cruel designs. Ahead, the trees opened up into another clearing, more suffocating than before, a ghostly fog sweeping across the ground like ethereal smoke. And there, at the center, hung a twisted effigy, a grotesque representation of the trapped souls, their faces swirling in agony, bound in place by despair. Suddenly, the laughter transformed once more, morphing into a high-pitched wail that sliced through the air, the trees trembling with its intensity. "Join us!" they called, voices now tainted with an insidious plea that sent a jolt of icy terror through my veins. "You must accept the darkness." Frozen in place, I felt the compulsion seize control. The very ground beneath me shifted, pulling me closer to that wretched effigy, inexorably dragged toward the web of despair it spun. The frosty air enveloped my limbs, wrapping tighter with every heartbeat, and as I gained awareness of my impending doom, the forest shivered and a new cacophony erupted, the laughter returning, echoing louder, now mixed with something insatiably malevolent. I turned in a panic, sure my escape path had vanished, my heart racing in sync with the rustling shadows closing in. but in the midst of that chaos, I caught a glimpse of movement. My brother stood among them, his eyes wide and hollow, casting a glance filled with despair. And then those eyes widened in horror, as if warning me of the fate I was about to embrace. "The cost is your soul," he screamed, the fabric of the darkness flickering violently around him as the shadows ravenously converged upon us, threatening to consume everything within their grasp. In that moment, the world erupted into a scream. The ground lifted beneath me, a final surge of chaos enveloping my senses. Everything around began to collapse, pulling me into a descent deeper than I could comprehend. With a strangled breath, I felt the earth shatter beneath my feet, dragging me into eternal darkness. The descent was endless, a spiral into a chasm of darkness that seemed to swallow all light and sound. Each moment blurred, like the memories of my brother fading with every heartbeat. I plunged deeper into the void, a realm governed by despair, and all the while, the whispers surged around me, pulling at threads of my sanity. "Help us!" the chorus shrieked, a cacophony of voices drowning me in sorrow. "You cannot escape," I gasped for breath, but the air was thick and heavy, a tangible force that clawed at my throat. Shadows danced around me, twisted forms that flickered like dying flames, their malice palpable. In the depths of my mind, I struggled against the nightmarish vision of my brother, his hollow gaze still haunting my every thought. Finally, with a jolt, I hit solid ground, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. I lay there, gasping, the silence pressing down like a weight. The stillness in this new place felt alien, like being trapped in the belly of an ancient beast. Slowly, my heart steadied, but dread coiled within me, an insatiable beast waiting to pounce. I forced myself to my feet, wherein is sharpened by the oppressive darkness around me. The air was thick with decay, laden with the stench of old, rotting wood and ash. Shapes lurked just beyond my vision, forms twisted and distorted, seeming to twist into the very shadows. They watched, hungry and expectant, clawing at the fear that crackled in the air. "Find us." a voice croaked, breaking through the thick fog, pulling me forward. "We're still here, trapped." With each whispered word, a pull grew stronger within me, beckoning me further into the heart of this unseen realm. I could not tell whether it was a memory or a curse, but curiosity twisted my gut like a serpent. How many were lost here? How many had already succumbed to this accursed place? I blinked against the darkness, trying to gather my bearings, when an ashen light flickered to life before me, casting grotesque shadows that danced along the ground. It illuminated a shrine of sorts. Broken remnants of photographs littered the area, their faces gazing out with hollow smiles and haunted eyes. "Help us! Please don't leave us!" they chanted, voices echoing as if drawn from the very earth itself. But the shrine was not merely a collection of memories. Woven through the photos were strands of what looked like old, blackened veins, pulsating ominously and drawing me near. As I approached, the faces transformed into agony, screams trapped within the abyss. They reached out, fingers stretching, yearning for something or someone. "Betrayer!" a voice screeched, raspy and desperate. "You covet our pain." I stumbled back, the realization crashing over me like a wave. They weren't just souls, they were remnants of those I'd lost, victims of the darkness I had unleashed. My hands trembled, pulling away from the shrine, but the ground seemed to pull me back, as though it were alive, a parasitic entity demanding tribute. From the shadows, a figure stepped into the flickering light, a man, his face twisted in anguish, eyes mirroring the torment of the rest. "Save yourself!" he rasped, his voice wispy like smoke. "This is no place for the living. Leave now before they take you." A tremor ran through the ground beneath me, a desperate thrumming that arose from the very heart of the darkness. I understood with horror that the forest was not just watching anymore, it was actively hunting. I could feel it probing, seeking the essence of my being. The air thickened, wrapping tightly around me, constricting like a serpent preparing to strike. "Join us. Become one with us." The chorus resumed, swelling to a fever pitch. Panic surged through my veins as that same horrifying sensation began to blossom within me, feeling of being devoured, consumed by the insatiable hunger of the shadows. I stumbled backward and turned, instinct driving me to flee from the encroaching hands grasping from the darkness, longing to drag me into their misery. But as I sprinted, the forest shifted, concealing my path in a disorienting maze of gnarled roots and jagged branches. Branches clawed at my skin, tearing through my clothes, waking sensations of raw pain, mixing with the cold horror that gripped my heart. The laughter resumed, mocking me, each sound reverberating through my bones until it invaded my mind entirely. The trees shifted, separating as if to reveal a grim path, beckoning me forward, a light at the end that felt wholly wrong, an inviting pulse busy devouring what little hope remained in my heart. I rushed toward it, the illumination intensifying as the air crackled with malevolent energy. Desperation drove me onward, but behind me, the shadows surged, driven like an unholy tide, closing in with an insatiable hunger. In that moment, I reached the edge of the clearing, a dim glow revealing an ancient well, its depths yawning like a hungry maw. I could hear whispers rising from below, promising relief from the horror above. My heart thundered in my ears, drawn to the edge as the shadows tightened their grip, the disembodied cries urging me to leap into the abyss, and then, just before I could make the ill-fated decision to plunge forward, a hand shot up from the well, skeletal and desperate. "Don't let them take you!" A voice roared, filled with agonizing strength. "You must fight." The hand grasped my wrist, the chill racing through my veins, and suddenly the shadows howled, a deafening cacophony of outrage that reverberated through the air. That I could feel my body teetering on the precipice, caught between the looming darkness and the haunting cry of salvation. With a single gasp, the shadows lunged forward, their fingers clawing at me like painted talons in an effort to drag me into their tormented realm, where I would be forever lost. And in that fateful instant, I had to choose: would I embrace the darkness or fight for my sanity against the terrifying forces hell-bent on claiming my soul? Panicked breath clawed at my throat, the dichotomy of survival and surrender pulsating through my veins. I sensed something malign and ancient lurking just beyond the peripheries of my vision, waiting for me to falter, waiting to consume me entirely. The skeletal hand tighter around my wrist felt like the last fragment of hope I could grasp, yet the shadows surged like voracious wolves, hungry for flesh and feared. That I glanced back into the gaping maw of the well where spectral faces churned, swirling like vapors captured in glass, each one a victim, each one a reminder of every soul that had vanished in the unforgiving forest. The tremors of their anguish reverberated through me, a chorus of torment demanding my surrender. Together. The voice bellowed from below, a seasoned warrior of despair, urging me to join them, to accept my fate. But I shook my head vehemently. They warranted not my allegiance, just as those anguished faces in the shrine did not. The hand tightened, warmth bleeding through the chilling grip into my skin. "You don't belong here," it pleaded. "Fight. You still have strength." The shadows recoiled for a fleeting moment, sensing the conflict within me. Their hissing whispers transformed into tormented shrieks, a sound more terror-inducing than any horror I had ever encountered. They lunged at me, claws stretching hooked and knowing, aiming for my legs, my ankles, hungry to drag me down. In a moment of instinctual desperation, I wrenched my wrist free, the feeling of betrayal stinging as I staggered back from the well. The ground quaked beneath me, the forest's trees moaning, their twisted branches reaching out as if to catch me before I fell. Refusing to consider the consequences of what lay ahead, I turned and ran, adrenaline surging through me as the shadows unleashed their fury. The skeletal fingers grasped at the air behind me, clawing at my clothes, and I could almost feel their venomous breath on my neck, a reminder of the choice I had narrowly escaped. "Join us," echoed the chorus, a dozen voices rising in anger and despair. "Join us," but there was no time to ponder. I fled deeper into the nightmarish landscape, navigating the sickening maze, dodging trunks that contorted into grotesque figures, faces merging from bark, judging, beckoning, disapproving. Suddenly, a bone-chilling laugh erupted from the Shadowsa, laughter familiar yet alien. It echoed and rolled through the trees, twisting around me like a serpent coiling for the kill. "Why did you leave us, brother?" The voice called, sorrowful, echoing with memories I longed to comprehend. I froze. The voice of me brother's voice. I turned slowly, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, my resolve wavering. "No!" I shouted against the gloom, battling the crippling sense of loss that crashed against my mind. "You're not him." But the laughter morphed, a cacophony of taunts that clawed at remnants of my memories, of the brother I had failed, feeding on the guilt that swirled around me, wrapping tighter like a noose. As I pressed forward, I could feel icy fingers grasping at the edges of my mind, dragging at my darkest thoughts, dredging up regrets long buried. Amidst my terror, I felt compelled to give in, to relinquish my fight, just as dark tendrils lunged for my ankles, pulling me toward the ground. I stumbled and fell onto the damp earth, loose soil clinging to me like viscous mud. Groans of the lost filled the air, overwhelming cries of souls yearning for blood. Then the chilling laughter burst forth again, crystal clear, resounding from all directions. "What will you leave behind, little brother?" it mocked. "What fate awaits you when you succumb?" Suddenly, a blinding light erupted before me, illuminating the horrifying faces that lingered in the darkness. I shielded my eyes but could not escape the painful brilliance of their sorrow. The faces of those forgotten, my brother among them, their features shifting and twisting, began to swirl. I was ensnared in a whirlwind of pain and regret, their cries mingling with the shadows, pleading their case a relentless torrent of anguish. Demanding closure, driven by a primal urge for freedom, I clutched my head in a futile attempt to block out their cries. Desperately, recklessly, I rose to my feet, forcing the adrenaline to carry me forward, away from the myriad of anguished memories. But as I ran, the earth quaked violently, splitting open beneath me. I could hear the deep growl of something ancient waking, stirring beneath the treacherous soil. The air thickened, pregnant with foreboding, as blinding light narrowed to a single beam that illuminated a nightmarish sight, a shimmering portal materializing just beyond the roots of a gnarled tree, radiating death and promises of shelter. Turning back, I felt the oppressive darkness swirling around me. A hungry tide intent on reclaiming what it lost, the desire to engulf me whole roared through the forests at in that piercing moment of choice. I faced the swirling abyss of anguish behind me and the shimmering light ahead, the tempting promise of escape or the treacherous embrace of certainty. The shadowy forms howled, their lamenting cries drowning out everything else, urging me to turn back, to choose them, to join their ranks. At that instant, the earth lurched beneath me again, and with a deafening roar, the portal began to close. Would I step into the light and risk losing myself forever, or plunge back into the eternal darkness where perhaps my brother awaited, buried beneath the weight of despair? With each fleeting second, the shadows coiled tighter, their icy breath mingling with the hot tendrils of fear rising within me. As the portal flickered, consuming my every nerve, ending with its insatiable chaos, I lurched forward in action both inevitable and irrevocable. And then, unnaturally, the earth beneath me cracked, the light dimmed, and the echoes of anguished souls resounded one final time as I plummeted deeper into the consuming void. "Don't let them take you," echoed through the chasm a last whisper, clinging desperately to my spirit as I disappeared into the unknown. I awoke with a start, gasping, my heart thundering in my chest. Somehow, I had escaped. The weight of the world felt lifted, and I blinked against the harsh light, flooded with a peace I hadn't known. Sunlight flooded the space around me, illuminating the familiar contours of my cabin. The smell of cedar mingled with the fresh scent of rain. I was safe. Yet something lingered beneath the surface of my relief, a gnawing itch that crawled at my